I am the family pastor here. I oversee children's ministry through high school, spend a lot of time with them, and I am so excited this morning that I get to come to you a little bit. And as part of this new series, This is the Way, we started a few weeks ago. Pastor Kyle kicked us off, and our other pastors have done a great job of introducing us to 1 John through this a little bit. But I want to kind of go backwards a little bit, make sure that you understand that what we're talking about when we talk about This is the Way. It's a Star Wars-based series that Pastor Kyle just is absolutely excited about. We wanted to continue this series while he was away. But if you don't know the Mandalorian series at all, you don't have Disney Plus at your house, I wanted to kind of give you a little perspective of what Mandalorian is like, what it's about. Or maybe the older generation maybe don't know a whole lot of Mandalorian or Star Wars. I compare it to True Grit, John Wayne's True Grit. He's traveling through the Old West, protecting a young child. It's the same thing. Mandalorian is that kind of thing. It runs kind of like an old Western saga where you have this old battle-worn warrior riding through the galaxy, protecting a young child as they go on these different adventures, trying to get the child to where it needs to be. And there's this special thing about that child. But a little more specifically about the Mandalorian, the person. Understanding a little bit to give us context of what we're talking about. The Mandalorian is the last of his kind. He is this old battle-worn warrior, and he is the last. At the very beginning of the series, most of his, if not all of his people have been slaughtered by the evil forces. Now he's the last one that continues to live out what he calls the way, and what the Mandalorians call the way. They repeat this phrase, this is the way. It's an understanding of a way of dignity, of purity, of how to kind of live life, but also fight evil in the world according to a set of standards, the ancient kind of creed that they have. So that's the Mandalorian. And he travels around with what the internet is called Baby Yoda. Actually, his real name is, we don't really know in the show, actually. He's simply known as the child. But what we do is we do a little research, if you will. The child, what some people call Baby Yoda, is in fact probably Yoda's son. So if you know anything about Master Yoda from the Star Wars trilogies, and then on into the rest of the movies, you have the child. So as we watch The Mandalorian, you begin to understand this child has special abilities, special powers, and mighty potential. And you see flashes of it as they travel throughout the galaxy. So you have the Mandalorian walking and protecting the child, living according to the way. And you have a child whose father probably is very powerful, and there's a lot of potential. So then we transition into 1 John. You have John living on the Isle of Patmos, the last of the original apostles. He's the last one. He's living in exile now. He's battle-worn by years and years of following Christ. He's now under arrest. He's been exiled. And he is the last of the people originally living according to what is called the way. Before Christians were called Christians, they were known as the people of the way. Simply known as, I don't understand those people, they live that way. And so now John is writing as the last of his kind, so to speak, writing to the young believers, the children, these people who are children of God, who have great potential, great power. And he sees these flashes of greatness, these flashes of who they are as he writes them. And that's what you have in 1 John. 1 John starts off with, this is the way of light. This is the way of light in chapter 1. We understand this idea, very Star Wars-esque, light and darkness, good and evil. There's a battle that's happening. And there's a group of people that are now going to stand up in the middle of the world, in the middle of the galaxy, and fight for what is good. And then we get to chapter 2 and 3. We're going to park on 3 this morning. This is the way of love. And then Pastor Brett is going to continue on and talk to us about another piece of this as we continue on in 1 John. So what we have 1 John chapter 3 is where we're going to spend a lot of time. So if you have a Bible with you, your phone, maybe the seat back, grab 1 John chapter 3 toward the back of your Bible and look up 1 John chapter 3, and that's where we're going to start talking. We're going to skim along through a few pieces. We're not going to get to every single verse. Hope you don't mind, but we're going to get through some of the key parts of just chapter 3, because I think there's a whole lot to say and a whole lot of parallels between the Mandalorian and the child, us as Christians, as children of God, as John writes to us and to the people. It says this, see what great love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called the children of God. That is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that they do not know him. Dear friends, we are now children of God, and what we have not yet been seen or known. But what we know is that Christ will appear, and that will be like him, for we all shall see him as he is. It is the beginning of chapter 3. It's the battle between good and evil. It's spelled out clearly for us what we have in front of us. The battle between light and darkness, the battle between other things and the children of God. It says, see, the word in the kind of the original language is behold, to stare intently at something. So stop what you're doing, look at this, is what John's saying. Behold, what manner of love the Father has lavished on us. This is a generous gift. You have potential. This is the way of love. If you're going to live that way inside of you, the Father has poured out over you this power that's going to become part of how you do battle in this world. That we should be called, the word there is actually invited. It's not just a calling, it's an invitation. You are now invited into the way of love. It continues on, it says that the world does not know you. The word world there is the surroundings, the decorations. It's literally as close as possible in the Greek to decorations. As you walk through the galaxy of all these decorations, all these things surrounding you, the way through it is the way of love. You, as the children of God, walk through into love. But the world doesn't, you don't fit, you don't seem to fit. If there's something going on in here, and he says, dear friends, beloved, listen to me. I want you to understand how you live this way of love. He gives us 6 things, 3 battles, and an instruction for us to understand how to live as children, as a child, as the child of God. So the first thing, verses chapter 3 to 10 is where we're going to cover. We're going to just kind of pull a few verses out of it. The first thing we understand is practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect is what I'm calling this section. Because it begins to talk to us about practicing purity, practicing righteousness, and not practicing sin. How are we going to live this way of love? By beginning to understand how we train up ourselves to become something different, and we begin to practice something. Like a good Jedi warrior, if you watch the original Star Wars series, you have Master Yoda teaching young Luke Skywalker how to live this way of the Jedi. Not giving into the forces of darkness, but giving into the force of light. He spends a whole lot of time practicing how to handle this new way of life. The Mandalorian does the same thing. If you watch who he is and how he's practiced and how he's prepared himself for this battle. So verses 3 and 4 says this, all who have this hope in him purify themselves just as he is pure. Anyone who sins breaks the law, and in fact, sin is lawlessness. Practicing purity, not practicing sin. This is us understanding that we are purifying ourselves. If anyone purifies himself, it's sanctified. We understand this because of the last 2 years of all of our sanitation and sanitizer. We practice sanitizing all the time. Anywhere we go, in and out, on the way in, on the way out. If you're a child, your mom and dad have a whole bag full of stuff because we are hand sanitizing all the time. We've gotten a habit in my family of constantly having hand sanitizer on us at all times. What it's saying here is practice, just like you practice making sure you don't get germs on you, practice that you don't get sin in your life. Sanitize yourself so that you can live up to the standard of perfection. Be pure as he is pure. The word here is perfect, We have the perfect example of love in front of us, but it takes us practicing that. It goes on and it says, but make sure that you are pure, make sure you are practicing. Anyone who, and the word there in the ESV and also in the Greek, it leaves the word practicing. Anyone who does this does not practice, keep on practicing sin and intentionally missing the mark. Sin here in this word is this word to miss the mark. But it goes a little bit stronger. In this context, it's actually intentionally missing the mark. My son and I spent a lot of time outside playing basketball. We've been spending a lot of time the last couple weeks. He's getting back into playing basketball. He's part of a rec league. And so we're outside, and I'm like, all right, this is how you practice making sure you make the shot. I want you to hit the mark. I want you to get the ball in the hoop. But it would really be silly for me to go outside and, hey, let's make sure we practice doing this. Look over the bush over there. Throw the ball in the bush. All right, when this car goes by, throw the ball at the car. Make sure whatever you do, don't hit the hoop. Let's make sure we practice this. So next 2 weeks, before you have the big game, we're going to practice not throwing the ball anywhere near the hoop. We're just going to make sure we practice everything else. And then he gets to the big game, what happens? He has no clue how to hit the mark. There's a lot of us, that seems kind of ridiculous, but there's a lot of us who are spending a lot of time practicing not living pure, not trying to live up to Christ's perfection. We're actually trying to make sure we fall short of the mark by making sure we don't even get near the mark. Or what we do is we try to find a way to get as close as we possibly can to the edge of sin. Well, I'm not sinning, but man, look at this right here. I got this nice little spot right here. I didn't step over, but I practiced getting as close as I possibly can away from purity, close as I possibly can to missing the mark, to sinning. The verse says, that is what you are. You are breaking the law. You know the standards. You know what's supposed to be, but instead you're practicing going as close as you possibly can to breaking God's law. Look at me. I didn't do it, but I'm close. As long as I didn't step over the line, I'm okay. And there's a whole lot of ways that we do that. And John's saying, no, don't. If anything, go the opposite direction and begin to live righteous. Live right in this world. Practice righteousness. And that's what the next section says, going down to verses 7 and 8. It says, dear children, do not let anyone lead you astray. The one who does what is right is righteous, just as he is righteous. The one who does what is sinful is of the devil, because the devil has been sinning from the beginning. The reason the Son of God appears is to destroy the devil's work. John changes the word. He's saying, dear children, instead of my children or beloved. The word there is toddler. I talk to his children. Next section, he kind of gets down on his knees like, little children, baby Yodas, like you have this amazing potential, but I'm going to have to talk to you like babies for a moment because you're still not living the way. This is the way to live life, but instead you're getting lost, wandering off, and losing the way. It says this, dear children, little babies, do not let anyone let you roam away off. For those of you who watch The Mandalorian at all, Baby Yoda sometimes loses his attention. Baby Yoda has this amazing power, does all these amazing things, has these flashes of greatness, but then other times, Baby Yoda wanders off into the swamp, and you see him eating a frog. The Mandalorian turns around, and there's Baby Yoda with a big old frog leg sticking out of his mouth, and just like, Mandalorian's like, get over here, we have this way to go. This is the way to go, we have to leave, and he's too busy eating a frog in the swamp. That's the mental picture I want you to see when we think about this in 1 John. Don't wander off. Do the work. Manufacture. It says this. Do what is right. Manufacture or make sure you are doing righteousness and not letting Satan, the liar, ruin your reputation. You have so much potential. You have so much to do with living in purity and righteousness, but instead you're breaking God's law. You're continuing to sin. The first section sums up this way, if you will. It says, this is the way of love, to practice purity and righteousness, and not to practice how good we can get at sinning and breaking God's law in love. The second section begins to understand this in a way as John continues to talk to us. He says this, and I've kind of phrased this, actions speak louder. John continues to talk to the people, the church and the people of God, the children of God. He says, all right, now as a group of people, I want you to individually live this way, but now as a group of people, I want you to live differently as well. So what we have is, skipping down a little bit farther into verses 16 and 17, 18 and 19, we have deeds and truth versus words. Verses 16 and 17, it says this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, that we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and it sees a brother and sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in this person? What we have is we have the first thing, which is actions, deeds. The first section talks to us and says, as little children, as baby Yodas that have so much potential, know who your Father is. Make sure you are living with action. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life. The word there is breath and spirit. He gave up his life and physical spirit for us. He gave up all of who he was in order to live for us so that we can live differently with our community of faith. Brothers and sisters in there, this word is not brother and sisterly love. It's talking about community love when it comes to the church. He's saying, before you can go out and love out there, you need to learn how to love in here. If you see a person that's a part of your community of faith in need, if you have possessions, the word there is livelihood. If you have the way you make your living, if you have enough of what you're doing with your life, that you can share your life and your livelihood with someone else, you need to make sure you do that. If you see and you don't have pity, the word there is sympathy, not empathy. If you have sympathy for the people in need in your community of faith, you are living out the way of love. You need to make sure you have sympathy for those in your community of faith. Otherwise, you're not demonstrating God's agape, godly, unconditional love. There's a battle that rages in our world about this idea of actions versus our deeds. What are we doing with our actions and our deeds versus our words and the things we say? We get tripped up and tricky with these little words. And that's where this next section begins to kind of help us understand this idea of truth. We are people of the way. We're the people of the truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You will worship me with spirit and in truth. John spends a lot of time in the Gospel of John and 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John talking about the truth. John 1:1, the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word became flesh, the world dwelt among us. We have the Logos, the logic became flesh. We have all summation of all logic and all truth put in human flesh in front of us. And John loves that idea, and it shows up in the 1st John as well. The truth, 18 and 19 says, dear children, once again, he calls them little babies. My baby Yodas, let us not love with words or with speech, but with actions and in truth. This is how we know we belong to the truth and how we set our hearts at rest in his presence. Baby Yodas, you have such power and potential. Don't get too wrapped up in your human reasoning and your human language. This is a tricky part of our society right now. well, if I think this and I use these correct words in this way, maybe I'll be okay. And we kind of wordsmith a lot of things right now, trying to figure out how to live a way of love. And well, if we don't say this, maybe we're more loving. If we do say this, maybe we are more loving. If we don't use that word, that phrase, that thing. And we use a whole lot of reasoning and language. That's the original language here. We're reading in Greek. He says, no. It's not about your human language and your human reasoning. It's about God's truth. Make sure you understand the truth. Do the work with actions. Toil and work in real facts. That we know that we belong, exist in truth, and that the very center of who we are, our hearts, allow us to understand that we can stand in the presence of God. In front of God, we can stand before him and say, look, my faith lives out in my actions. My love is more than just me telling people I love them, talking about love, having blog posts about love, social media posts about love, but I actually did the toil, that's the word, toil and work to go out and do the work of love and to do the work of truth. I have all this amazing potential because of who the Father is in me. And now I'm going to go and live the way. This is the way of love. I'm living in the way. And I summed it up this way. This is the way of love, that we live a life out loud in our actions and our truth, not just use empathetic words or empty words, but we talk about what love is. The final section is the power of the heart. When it comes to the very center of who we are, there is a power in who we are. In the first couple sections, we're like, man, this is really kind of tough. It's really kind of, I feel a little beat up by this at this moment. But this is when God begins to kind of work through John and talk to the people and says, all right, let's get to the heart of the matter. What is the very center? The word heart in the Bible is gut. What is my gut saying to me? What do I really gut reaction feel when it comes to being all that God has called me to be and living out my potential? What is inside of me? Skipping down to verses 20 and 24, we talk about this idea of confidence and obedience versus condemnation. Confidence and obedience versus condemnation. If our hearts condemn us, we know that God is greater than our hearts. We know everything because he knows everything. Dear friends, if our hearts do not condemn us, we have this confidence before God and receive from him everything we ask because we keep his commands and do what is pleasing to him. Our hearts do not find fault with us because we are living the way of love. And we understand that our Father God is bigger, greater, bigger than our hearts. And we know, and then he knows everything, the whole entirety of our surroundings. So suddenly we're trading off world for God's complete presence. And what we have, and he says, goes back to using the word beloved. He switches back from calling them babies to saying, now I want to call you again beloved. For our hearts do not condemn us because we have this blunt outspokenness before God. Receiving, getting a hold of him for everything we ask because we keep his legal ordinances spiritually and do what satisfies his law. That's what this verse is saying. If we are living according to the way of love, even in those moments when we misstep, we have this confidence that we can turn our hearts to God. And then when we come to God, we can have this blunt outspokenness. That's the exact language. This blunt outspokenness before God to say, God, I don't want to live in condemnation of myself, and I don't want to live in anybody else's condemnation. I stand before you and you alone only. I want to be a master Jedi of love. I want just to pour out the power of my heart to pour out because I want to satisfy only you. Verses 23 and 24 says, this is his command, to believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he commands us. The one who keeps God's commands lives in him, and he in them. This is how we know what love is, and that he lives in us, that we know it is by the Spirit he gave us. This is his command. This is his instructions. God the Father gives us clear understanding of what the way is. This is the way of love, that we believe, we have faith in the name, in the famous reputation. The word name here is actually this famous reputation. We have this famous name that we can lean on for the Son, Jesus Christ, to love one another as he commands us to do. The one who keeps God's commands lives in him, and he in them. And this is how we know that we live in his way. This is how we know, because we have a spirit. Inside of us is so much potential. Inside of us, we have this opportunity, not to continue to be baby Yodas, wandering off, getting lost, but to begin to grow up in this power and in this love and in this light that we have in us. Because our Father is endowed with us such amazing potential that we can handle the power he's given us, so that we can battle what's going on in our world, that we can stand up as warriors of light, of warriors of love, and look at our world around us and say, we're here. We're not trying to live as close as we can to sin and for our own benefit. We want to step back and live in purity. We want to do more than just talk about what it looks like to love, but we want to live out love, even down to giving up some of who we are in our livelihood, make sure that other people have and know and feel love. We don't want to spend time with empty words and tell you how much we appreciate your struggle. We want to tell you how we can help you. We want to be a part of your struggle. We want to walk you through your struggle and help you come out of it. So that in our hearts we feel not condemned and guilty, but we feel a heart that's absolutely overwhelmed with confidence, because we can stand before God and say, God, this is me. This is how I've lived. I've done my best. You've given me a path of the way, and I've walked that path. Even when I've messed up, you have become and you've stepped in as the way of love and forgiven me and taken over my life, so that I can live knowing that you are bigger than the surroundings of the decorations. I can live differently. The point here is, this is the way of love, to have a godly heart of confidence and obedience that overcomes the condemnation of ourselves and others. We're going to take a moment right now. This is an action step for us to purify, to reset our minds and our hearts for the rest of our week as we get ready to love and live in the way. In front of you, around you somewhere, is a communion cup. It may look a little something like this if you're new to our church. But grab that, because we want to take a moment to really sit down together and to wrap up our time together as the people of the way, gathering together, coming together. 1 Corinthians 11 challenges the early church and challenges us to take this moment with reverence and humbleness, making sure that there's nothing in our hearts or in our minds that is impure, so that we partake in a way that is unworthy of God. This is a moment when we step away from the sin of our lives and seek purity. This is the moment when we step away from all the words that we've said this week and say, this week I want to live differently. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take about 15 to 20 seconds just to pray, to talk to God before we partake together.